we have some things.
You are now being recorded.
We have some things that are absolutely exclusively under our control. Okay? And then there are assets that we have within here that are controlled by outsiders. If we were a community of little rabble-rousers, right, we could talk about the assets that we have that are in here, like, for example, all this fine equipment, the electricity, the AC, the projector, the connection, Skype connection that's worthless, all that kind of stuff. And then there are the potential building blocks, which are the resources that are outside our little community and that are controlled by outsiders. They affect us a great deal. We need them, we want them, but those resources, such as really good bus transportation, that's the one that affects me the most. This is very crummy public transportation in the city. It's very isolating. It's very poor, and it really promotes people driving very irresponsibly. Okay, now in the individual capacity, there's skills, language, knowledge. There are individual income, individual local businesses, home-based enterprises, the cultural organizations, including the churches, that are very, very, in my experience, there's nothing like, a couple of nuns or some religious people that really want to do something great, that want to help you. They can move mountains. Now, this is, when I was in the DR, we organized a little community-based thing called Helping Healing Hands, to work with people who had HIV, who were better. For practical purposes, they were healthy. They were taking the medication, and they turned into healthy people. But nobody would hire them because they had HIV. And those people all wanted to work. They really wanted to work. So what we had as our primary building blocks were people who had different skills. Like Yocasta over there was a complete whiz at sewing, but she couldn't get a job making T-shirts for this company because they were all tested people. And this guy, she needed a sewing machine, and he needed a refrigerator for what is called kind of like the equivalent of a convenience store in a very rural community where it's just too far to go to the city. So this little convenience store filled the needs. They had just everything that you need all the time: water, ice, milk, combs, everything. So what the community-based organization did was to pool resources to give those people very, very tiny grants, usually less than $200, that they could then pay back. Locally controlled financial institutions are like a step up from that. They're primary building blocks. They're within the communities. And what we were doing in La Romana would be something like this. We had grants. There was no, they weren't considered loans because there was no interest. So they were not microloans. We called them grants. The people would pay back the loan, but there was no interest in it. So
I remember there is an organization. I'm not sure what is the name of it. It's like helping people to get jobs through giving them loans. I think it's like online.
Oh
thing.
Yeah, you've heard about that. Yes,
Yeah.
Definitely. If you, I would like
and
you.
it's worldwide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can. If you have a credit card, you can loan money to people. And if you could, for the next time we get together, could you research that and give a 5-minute presentation on that? It's a very powerful thing. The Grameen Bank has kind of evolved into that. And this Grameen Créditos. Worldwide, there's microloans. There's Grameen. This guy actually won the Nobel Prize for this, and he
Mohammed
really,
Yunus.
sorry.
Mohammed Yunus, I think his name.
Is that his name? Okay. For next week, can you give a 5-minute presentation on this guy and his Grameen? No, that's he will do one, and you will do one.
Same thing?
No, he will do another institution which is not the Grameen. You will do Grameen and Mohammed, whatever his name is. I can't remember. What is it? Drummus?
Sorry?
What is the guy's name?
I think Mohammed Yunus.
Yunus. That's it. Yunus. So you'll do Yunus, and you'll do that other. I think it's Kabil or something like that.
So you want the PowerPoint?
Yes, and 5 minutes. You can use up to 5 slides. Okay. Okay. Now, when we were doing our capacity assessment, needs and capacity assessment in this in the process of getting together, we were working with very rural communities where the people were caregivers for people living with HIV. Some of the caregivers were themselves people living with HIV, and we identified as our major assets. There was this Haitian order of sisters, religious sisters, nuns. They were spectacular people, and they could find anybody, and they could be found by anybody. People who needed them could recruit them. So they served a great purpose. I have a real challenge geographically. I can't find my way around even Florida International University without the sugarcane plantations in this area. They looked like oceans. Without these nuns, nobody would ever have been identified at all. Now, you notice what this kid is doing here? This young woman here learned how to do. I was doing all the data entry for the in this clinic. This lady was one of the graduates of our mother-to-child transmission program. She had a child in our mother-to-child transmission program, and when we were doing our needs assessment, which was led by that little community of women who had children in our program, she said that she was really interested in learning how to use computers. And this started with a process where she watched me, and then she took over the data entry and monitoring and evaluation activities for the clinic. And it was actually a skill that she never really knew she had, that she could be so meticulous and so good at this. This grandmother raised her orphan grandchild. These are all caregivers. You see this baby, this kid over here? This is real bad AIDS. Real bad AIDS. His sister was. I'm talking about a community that's considered to be just a basket case a community. These people are supposed to be just basically have no assets. They're poor. Nobody knows how to read or write. And this woman, for example, without knowing how to read or write, she doesn't know Haitian Creole. This guy doesn't know Spanish, but she knew how to make a bed for him out of her sofa, and she got this guy back from being practically dead, giving him his directly observed tuberculosis therapy and his antiretroviral therapy, and he celebrated Easter. That's an Easter Sunday picture by actually practically coming back from the dead himself. You see the little girl holding him? That's the youngest caregiver in this community of caregivers. This is 14-year-old kid that got this little boy. I just gave her the antiretrovirals and the medications that she needed to bring the little guy back, and there he is. This was less than 2 months after he was dying. These people were all very poor people that lived in this rural community of sugarcane workers in a sugarcane field. None of them had birth certificates. None of them had identity in the country. None of them had any rights of citizenship. None of them had formal education or income, and yet they actually were. They had tremendous assets. When I hear the words resource poor applied to Haitian Dominicans that live in sugarcane plantations, I tell people, you don't know what you're talking about. These people are poor, but they themselves are tremendous resources. You don't see people anywhere in the world doing that kind of skill, mixing skill with sheer humanity and tireless ability to keep on going, and be committed to growing and to learning and fighting for their rights. Okay, next slide. Put the lights on. So, who knew that nuns could be a primary building block? And these were nuns who work in transitioning women out of sex work, and also supporting women who are still in sex work by treating STIs and distributing condoms, and giving information on HIV and STI prevention, and on all expenses paid prevention of mother-to-child transmission for women who are living with HIV. You can read about this in this article that appeared in the Miami Herald.
What is that? LRY?
Primary building block. The primary building blocks is what we were talking here: assets and capacities in a neighborhood that are largely under neighborhood control. And these people were actually in a part of the town that was basically all brothels. And in 1997, they were the first ones in the country, in the Dominican Republic, to introduce mother-to-child transmission prevention outside the capital. And they had the national program was reporting 15% mother-to-child transmission. They were actually having 3% mother-to-child transmission. So, like, are those people really no capacity, really no resources? Okay, secondary building blocks, assets in the community largely controlled by outsiders, which would be the equivalent of our internet access and our physical resources, the schools, health facilities, police, fire department. And then there are the potential ones, things like whatever public money, which is not much anymore. I mean, you could just as well take that out. Since the reform of aid to dependent family and to temporary family assistance, that isn't. There's not much of that anymore. Okay, now in terms of getting the needs mapped together and balancing that with the assets, we work with the squeaky wheel gets the grease principle. You have to show the need. You have to show where the outrageous things are happening. Lead poisoning, for example, unemployment, alcoholism, AIDS. The thing about lead poisoning that is contrasts with those things and childhood asthma is that those are strictly environmental things that impact some of the most sympathetic people in a community, which are innocent children. So in terms of that's partially why I got into asthma, because it is really a very subversive thing. Asthma is a real indicator. Childhood asthma is a real indicator of very poor environment. very irresponsible societal neglect of children's health. While unfortunately, even though teenage pregnancy is also that way in domestic violence, that's easier to blame the victims. But I mean, most people, if pressed, will know darn well that their kids, if they were in that same situation, they'd get lead poisoning too. They'd be thrown over there. I mean, it's not like those people are being lazy or evil. And this is the map, and this in your textbook. And I normally don't promote textbooks, but this is very cheap. This one is like $20, and if you seriously cannot afford this community organizing, just tell me privately, and I will secure you a copy. It's really I'm not going to get you rules for radicals, but that is a very handy thing, and it's a lot more legible in the book. You can also, I think, Google Books may have some segments of that. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. But what you're doing here is kind of organizing for the community, for the members of your organizing group, where we have our strengths. And using this map, you can figure out what kinds of community-wide research, planning, and decision-making processes can most fairly and effectively advance the rebuilding process in our neighborhood. And with all of these have caveats, which unfortunately, a lot of times the research that is most effective, fastest, quick would also be the one that's most intrusive and most unwelcome and mistrusted. You've got to balance. And inventorying and enlisting participation of major assets inside the community, with the caveat that ownership can very easily, especially, all of us are always going to be outsiders. Even if you go to the community where you were born and raised, you have gone through a process of just by education where you're no longer the person you used to be. And there's always going to be that mistrust. You are all outsiders. So am I. And so are you. So all of you are.
I'm uneducated.
Yes, I know you're not an outsider, but you will be. You'll become an outsider soon enough, sweetheart. And the idea of being an outsider is that it's never really as much of a barrier as you think. Like all of these people here with whom I work, they could tell right away, even on the phone, they could tell by my voice that I wasn't from there, that I wasn't one of them. And when they looked at me, they could tell, not from here, from very far away. And there was something about the way I spoke also that sounded to them like it had an edge. Not that anything that intentional that I was doing at all. It's just my accent. You know, I was an outsider, but you got to use what you got to get what you need. And what I had was that I was very sincere, and I told them all I want to do is get you where you want to be. And you don't want to be where you are right now, because it's horrible. It was really horrible. It's like no jobs, no nothing, just being thrown out of everything, having your stuff be put out on the street when people found out you have HIV. Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry.
What after you left? I mean,
I'm sorry?
what happened after you left?
After I left that organization,
I mean, do you leave people and then they go back to what they were?
you know, you can never go back. The level of dissatisfaction, that the only thing that I can take 100% credit for is that I got them to understand that they should be outraged, that they were being shafted. Yes, sweetie.
Wasn't part of the whole this whole concept that you're empowering them to change their lives, so that it's less likely if you're there like, take this, do this, and everything will be better.
I was there
Once you
earlier.
leave, there's a lot, going, remission, but like, when you empower people to improve their own lives, and then they know what they're doing and why they're doing it and how it's making their life better, it's more likely that they'll continue those things after you leave.
They miss me, but that thing didn't fall apart because it didn't really depend on me. I was always the outsider. The leadership in this operation turned into this girl right here, that one, and that one. Those people were the leaders. That little girl, the 14-year-old, is in medical school now, and that was a long time ago. The kid is a school child now, and she is planning on eventually working in our clinic. Time goes fast, but what my point is that this doesn't really work if you are if everything depends on you, because even if I had said, okay, like the sisters, they go there to spend their entire life. That's it. They might go for vacation to Spain or whatever, but they don't intend to ever leave. But I didn't have the possibility of doing that. I didn't have any real plans to leave. But then when my father got sick and he needed me, I really definitely did plan to eventually leave. And community organizing, if you're at the point where people are dependent on you, then you're not really working towards independence. You have to build leadership, and everywhere there's leadership. Especially, no offense, but many women are just natural leaders, natural takeovers of things, and they're not nearly as ego conscious. So it's very efficient. They can go from being very, very afraid of everything to being very competent and just leaders. Leadership is something doesn't require a degree or even any credibility. You just get in there and start leading. But yeah, to answer your question, the program is lost its funding in 2009 due to the crash, but without external funding, they found a way to keep it going until they were able to sustain it. These women are unbelievable. They're just amazing. Okay, the community planning process aims to involve as many representatives of internally located and controlled assets as possible. And sometimes those people don't want to work together, but it's the community organizer's job to try to bridge whatever barriers there may be. There has to be some version of a community capacity inventory. That map, that inventory, that process of finding out what people can do is very critical. Community building strategies that take full advantage of the interests and strengths of participants and for building the power to define and control the neighborhood's future. Once asset development has been identified, then bridging to persons and organizations outside the community. It's a lot of work. I would strongly encourage you, if you haven't done so already, to click on those things, because they talk about micro enterprises in terms of community organization, which are very, very liberating experiences. Okay, and now for some fun. Okay, can we get the lights are on?
Should I continue recording?
Yeah. She's not going to be able to participate today?
Not today. Next week. I'll figure it out.
You're great, Pina. You're great.
I am.
Joyce actually added a couple of points. Did you all got the transcript of this, right? Our secret objectives. Remember?
You're welcome for typing it up.
You're awesome, Tina. You're awesome.
Is that a giant Post-it?
That is a giant poster.
That is awesome.
Mercedes, you're going to facilitate today. I warned you that.
Can she facilitate? Can I write?
Okay, you can write, but I warned you guys that we're going to have. It's not going to take long. We don't have that much time, and I did want you to take a few more minutes to reflect on your secret objectives. Mercedes. Lead me, guide me along the way. Fine.
I know, but it'll wake you up.
To get up. Yes.
We're gonna need a.
Yes. There's some
Some
in
sort of
the
utility.
purse you pick your color.
I wonder what color I'll pick. Oh look, there's a pink.
No, not pink. That one. So use one of these. There's gotta be one of these that works. And you're welcome to have this one. I know for a fact that it works.
Oh, the pink shows up good on the white. And those are for dry erase.
They work for paper too. And if it's just good practice, okay? Let me give you a little narration while I get this show on the road. The best thing about this, the reason why so many community organizers are hooked on this thing is because it's magic. See, it's magic. The magic of this is that you write people's words down and that and get people who are very unaccustomed to being listened to actually clarify what they're saying, and to actually have the experience of somebody being really trying to listen to them. Somebody writing their names by a statement, getting that ownership of the statement. Do you have your secret objectives handy? You notice that, no? Okay. Oh, nobody printed it out? Oh wow, I should have thought to. Okay,
I have it.
let's go ahead. I think what we could do, no, that's not what we could do is to,
It's not printed out. But it's my
I don't want you to write it out again, but the things that are clustered together here is that a lot of people brought, in a sense, we could almost do like an issue selection here, and I'm trying to put together some of these things that seem to be naturally coming together. If you could, Carrie, you could do this one. Put together these three things. Tools for starting a community-based organization.
Should I put issue selection and then that, or?
Yeah, put issue selection first. Tools for starting a CBO. And then there's another one. This was something that you suggested, Carrie. Community connections and resources, and how to make initial contacts.
Community CBO?
A community-based organization. Tools for starting a community-based organization. Good. Sorry? Yes. Community connections and resources. And then another bandar, identifying existing resources. We're going to start with just those three. Are people interested in the ability to actually make their own community-based organization? Is that something that interests you? I know Bandar is interested. Are you interested? How about you, Carlos?
I'm interested.
Okay. Now there is a legal process. Making a community-based organization is a legal process. to bring together those three tools for starting a CBO. This is something. By the way, if you guys run into any trouble at all finding information about this stuff, which you will not, you'll totally have. There are actually websites where they teach you from soup to nuts how to start a community-based organization. 5 minutes next week, okay? Get my panel of experts going. Okay, the strengths and weaknesses of different models, which is something that Hideaki had thought. We have approached some of that. Do you feel that there's more to be explored in that? Or were you talking about, you were not talking just about the needs assessment and the assets assessment. You were talking about like social action, locality development. Okay, so that really is going to take us a little more time. These are not something that we can go do again. 5-minute presentation. Okay, Mercedes had actually, Mercedes. Mercedes. Sorry. You know what that means in Spanish? Mercies. Okay, now I would title that one. You had expressed an interest in exploring how to gain the trust of a community. And I would venture to say I was thinking about that, about how to group that with other issues, and I wondered if we could not just spend a few minutes together thinking in terms of how do you come to deserve the trust of a community, how do you earn the trust of a community, experiences, thoughts. I think all of us may have some insights on that, and if you could do me a favor and pick a color, and then make sure that after you record somebody's comment, to remember the business about putting their name. I know I am terrible with names, but it's something that in this game you gotta get good at it. You gotta get good at it because it's very powerful for people to be addressed by the name. Okay, so I would like you to lead a brief conversation on how you come to earn the trust of communities.
I think you can earn the trust of the community by when you go in to talk to people, like you don't act like you just know everything, and like you try to get their insight so they can feel like you know what you're doing, they know what they're doing, and that you're not trying to take over.
Now, you want to address this community and get them to do just that. So what you're saying is that you come, you listen to people, you don't come in like you know everything. I want you to do that process now with this group.
This is the community, and you're trying to show them that you don't know everything. You want to know about what they think they need and what they think they have, and their feedback.
Go. Be brave, Mercedes. You're among friends.
Are we discussing like things that would empower us for the community to trust us a little more?
Exactly. What things?
I would say maybe having empathy and trying to understand how people feel about what it is that we're trying to present to them. Having empathy and compassion, I would say.
It seems like his word is empathy. So you put empathy, and you kind of mirror or echo what he's saying, and then put Carlos beside it.
I have a tiny experience.
I'm sorry?
I have a tiny experience in that.
Okay. Now, when somebody wants to share a tiny experience, the thing to do is just act really enraptured because you finally got somebody to talk. This is a great triumph. Go, Mari!
When I was in my internship here in the Bachelor, we went like a group of intern doctors, dentists, to a very,
You're a dentist.
yeah, I
Cool.
divorced dentistry. I don't like it. I don't like hanging around dental chair, neither a patient nor a dentist. Anyways, we went to like an educational, educational and research. What is it called? Anyway, we went to a very tiny village, and it was
In where?
back in Saudi Arabia. It was in a rural area, and we were wearing our lab clothes, and we entered the elementary school for girls. And after we did, for the first visit, just to set the everything and know where to put our presentation slideshow and stuff like that. And we had a second appointment to do like the examination for the girls. And when we were leaving, the school principal called me. And she just picked me up. It's not like I'm a leader or anything. And she told me that in that rural area, girls can't go out with lab coats or something like this. Is very shocking to the community. So she asked me if we can wear like the local girls there when we were entering the school, and there we can wear our lab coats, and then when we get back out of the school, we were like the locals. And I conveyed or delivered her message to the rest of to my colleagues, and we did exactly what she said, because we want to gain her trust, and we don't want to shock that community. So it was like that experience.
Can you translate that into? I mean, that's actually
Culturally appropriate.
a beautiful bridge. When somebody gives you a tip like that, and you can act on it, and that Mercedes, you can summarize that by saying adopting the clothing that people express a desire for you to adopt.
Yeah, although we're from the same country, but people in the rural areas are different, and we didn't expect that they think differently. So.
It's within the same country, and even within the same little towns, little villages, there can be so many differences. And if you have the humility to not turn around and say, do you realize this is the 21st century? You need to have the girls see me alive, because I mean, you could have done that, and you could have just missed an opportunity to respect somebody, to show somebody some respect and build that bridge. You did right. You did right.
But actually, my mentor didn't. My mentor, she has a PhD in public health. She didn't. In the second visit, when she came with us, she intended to shock people. She thought that she's enlightening them, and I didn't like this.
I think it's like, what on earth? You win some tiny little
I didn't
petty
like
battle,
that.
and you've completely lost
Yeah,
a
but
golden opportunity.
yeah, but thanks God that we were the majority, so they didn't pay attention to her because we were the majority, and it worked perfectly fine.
I think also part of it is just the presumptuousness of I'm going to enlighten them.
Yeah.
That sort of mentality is just, it's indicative of the larger problem, approaching the community and re-educating them to the right way to be.
It's just it's a golden opportunity that she gave you, and I'm so glad that person trusted you enough to not just stew in there and say, God, what a bunch of thoughtless people. She actually gave you an opportunity, and you took it. And that's Amani.
A-M-A-N-I.
It's
What does
like
that mean?
Armani, but it's with a bar.
It's like our money,
Yeah.
but it's not a $2,000 jacket.
Yeah. It's more.
I assume that's how you spell it.
What does Amani mean?
Wishes.
Wishes.
That is correct, right?
Yeah.
I have a couple of friends with that name. That's the only reason.
That gets into, actually
she said. This is about, I think, means this is specifically about clothing, but I think the more general term we can use is cultural appropriateness. Like, I also have a tiny experience, like when some of us were taking the history of a lady. So, in a place like India, it is generally taken for granted that if a lady has children, she is married. And especially rural women, it's very rare to find women who are single mothers or not married but having children. So, but we were following the history sheet mechanically. We all have a pro forma. So we were like first asking how many children do you have, and then things like that. But then I suddenly noticed that we had missed that point. So rather than applying the common sense, we asked, then jumped back and asked, are you married? And she got so irritated, she just refused to answer any of our questions. So I think means that does we can do a wonderful job in losing the trust of a community by doing something like this.
Please put that. I gotta tell you, this is another one of those true stories. True stories. You know, in the United States,
Those
It
are meant
is-
to write on paper. Don't listen to her. She's insane. She knows what she's talking about as far as medical stuff, but everything else.
but wait, the prostitution or commercial sex work is actually very stigmatized in the United States. It really is. It's legal in one state, but in just about all the rest of the United States, not only is it illegal, but it's also highly, highly stigmatized. Now, in many other countries, especially Latin American countries, what is highly stigmatized is for women to have a lot of sexual relationships, uncommitted sexual relationships, which are a lot more respected here than our commercial sexual relationships. Okay, back in '86, I was sent to Guatemala to do a survey of gonorrhea and chlamydia because they were having a little outbreak of this resistant strain, and the phrasing of it was in Spanish, but it was an American questionnaire that we were supposed to ask, and the way that it was phrased was, have you ever been offered money for sex? Because here you can't say, have you ever sold sex, because that's illegal and you don't want to get into that, but you can say, have you ever been offered? Have you ever offered anyone money for sex? And like by the third time I asked them, this girl just got up and she said, what do you think I'm doing this for? For fun? Do you think I'm doing this to attract attention? I'm doing this to feed my children. What do you think? And I just suddenly said, I am insulting this person by saying this. Like another one said, pues claro, of course I'm getting paid. What do you think I'm doing this for? Laughs? I just thought, I was using the language. I was using Spanish, I was using the language, but I was not thinking in terms of how insulting something like that is. And we were trying to exactly do the opposite. We were not trying to insult people, because here it's an insult to call a woman a prostitute. Over there, it's an insult to call a woman who's having sex with a lot of men not a prostitute. I mean, she can only be a prostitute, otherwise she is like some kind of lost soul. And you go, but I'm getting this feedback then when I come back to Atlanta. When it's feedback of, you should raise people's consciousness about their freedom to have sex, if they want to, whatever. And I'm going, that is not my mission. That's not my mission.
I would say, goes into that presumptuousness and the sort of the ethnocentrism. Like in this country, you're right. Calling someone a whore or a prostitute is very pejorative. In some countries, that's actually a status of it's
job.
Well, not just a job, but a respected status. And
But maybe it's in Guatemala it was not a respected
No, I'm
status,
talking
but it's a heck of a lot better than just
no,
being
Exactly.
falling into
Yeah.
bed.
I'm not
whenever-
talking exclusively about Spanish-speaking countries. There's other countries, like in Russia, it's more acceptable, and and here, you know, it's like, oh well, she has sex with lots of partners, but at least she doesn't charge for it. You know, that means that she's, you know, sexually empowered. But you know, in some countries, that the same thing is viewed. But this whole thing that you're just trying to empower them to get what they want, and not to impose your own cultural ideals on them.
Exactly. Okay, so I would, to summarize that, I would say cultural humility. And just the ability to understand that you could be making a big mistake. And when you are trying to gain the trust of people, actually articulating that and saying up front, I'm going to say things that are going to sound crazy to you. And you just have to keep in mind that I'm learning. I am learning about you.
I too.
Bandler and Deep, yes?
Yeah, I think like hearing both Manny and Deep, like rephrasing or trying, you know, for example, going to the area and find a trusted person that or the community that trust, and try to get from him most of the feedbacks and things that the community look at will minimize these things.
Well, you know, that's the role that the principal was taking. She
Yeah.
took you under her wing just with the assumption that you weren't trying to shock them. That's the way city kids are. You know, you weren't trying to do anything outrageous. You were just not aware of what the meaning was for that. And once these ladies clarified to me that what I was saying was offensive, I just backed up. I told them, believe me, that was the furthest thing from my mind.
So when you say cultural humility and telling them in the beginning that it's not your intention to insult them.
That's a good way to start a conversation as you start.
And that's like to restep the steps, like, you know, put things in step. Like, for example, a new situation, you can ask first if she's married or not, then ask how many children instead of asking how many children. And this, yeah, like I have a similar experience, like in a clinic, when we have a female that she's coming for an examination, and I'm going to the room to do the examination for her. She will refuses. But then when I, like, for example, when she comes, and I will tell her that I'm the one who's doing the examination. You have the rights, you know, to ask for a woman, you know, to do this examination. She will say no. Okay, you can't do it. But if it's like forced on her
Of course.
this is your only option, she will say no. But if you
see,
give
when
her
you
choices,
when you do that, and this is not a manipulative strategy. This really is earning the trust and deserving the trust all at the same time. That attitude of empowerment. You have the power to say no to me. You have the right to do what you feel most comfortable with. Sometimes that is empowering enough for a person to be able to say, you know, it's all right. It's all right. Let me make sure. Carlos Hideaki, did you have some additional thoughts about the point of gaining trust, earning trust, deserving trust?
Well, I was thinking something else. I was thinking that if a person is in a leading capacity,
In what?
in a leading role
Yeah.
within the community, and you're working with the community, setting goals. Those goals have to be realistic, and you have to keep your word, and hold yourself
Keep your
accountable
word. Keep your word.
with what's attainable and what's not attainable. So I would say keeping your goals realistic and keeping your word.
I would say if there is nothing that will shut the door completely on people, is assuring people that something's going to happen, and then it absolutely does not happen.
Right.
That most people just cannot understand that, and many people that will forgive you for other things like faux pas, just like coming in with the wrong words, the wrong outfit and stuff. They forgive that, but if you actually promise and build up all this expectation, this is going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, and then it totally doesn't happen. When I was doing that grant, the proposal for the USAID grant, I was so scared of that. And we actually had one session where all that we discussed was, if you don't get the grant, what are our next steps? So it was clear in people's heads that the grant was not a sure thing. We were trying, we were competing for a grant. And then, when we actually got the grant, it was more than just high fives. And these people were, I had kind of just been so obsessed with making sure that they knew that this was a long shot, that we could have gotten a Nobel Prize, and they would have not thought it was anything better than getting this damn grant for this activity. Because that is a principal issue with losing trust, is misleading people. People just don't like to be lied to, and no matter how old, how young, how naive, they just don't like it. Thank you very much. Good job. This was mine.
I actually put that as both you and Deep, because pretty sure it was both of y'all.
Both of y'all? Both of y'all?
I can say that because I'm from the South.
Is that Southern? Freedom. Let's do these quizzes. Okay. Let me tell you for the newcomer.
Doctor, I had a
Yes.
small comment.
Even a big comment, Deep. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's late, but I can't help sharing this. This is actually from Dr. Darrow's experience, and I'm a big fan of Dr. Darrow. So, he had an autobiographical piece on his experiences. It was a publication, so we have to read that. And there he says that when he was young, and in those days when he was looking for this, the sources of HIV and things like that, people who visit the bathhouses, the gay people. So he was interviewing some person, and he writes that I was known as a public health expert and things like that. Then he writes, it is somewhat like this, that on that day, this soft-spoken man taught me a lesson that this gentleman will never forget throughout his life. So he was just keeping on interrogating him and getting annoyed because he was not getting any response. He was probing like a police. How many persons have you had sex with? Did you have anal sex? Did you visit a bathhouse and things like that? And he completely refused because maybe he got it by, maybe he was being truthful. He had it by drug use or something, or he didn't know. Maybe it was blood transfusion. And he kept on doing this, and then suddenly he writes it this way. Then suddenly the man did what any sensible person would do. He neither hit me nor abused me. He just started crying. And then I realized what I was doing. So that was.
Boy, that is very powerful.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my
So I think that
goodness.
is one point, being non-judgmental. Because he was being
Yeah,
judgmental.
I'm sorry. Can we?
I
No, it was
already
in the
transcribed
health
everything, so
Yeah.
I can.
You really. I'm so sorry that. Thank you so much, because that's a big boo boo to miss that point. You really can totally lose people's trust by applying or even giving them the impression that you're. Yeah. It's a big mistake. It closes a lot of doors.
We were actually just talking about this the other day. Somebody found out I had diabetes, and they immediately were like, "Oh well, you eat too much sugar, or it's because of your weight." And I said, "No, I got diabetes a long time ago when I was very young and I was very skinny, and And I
Type
lived
one,
with
she
my
was a
health
little
nut
kid.
parents who did not let me eat just sugar all the time. And they're like, well, really, you did something to get diabetes. And I completely shut down. I was like, I'm not talking to you anymore. I think you're an idiot.
Doctors do that a lot of time. I mean,
All the time.
all the time.
All the time. And it's a big mistake because you know something? So do public health people. I'm so sorry, but that is the truth. And when you're telling people who know for a fact that they have done nothing to deserve a life,
Like there are doctors I have heard, or maybe even I have done it sometime that when in the labor room, like women are shouting out of pain, I have heard doctors who are getting very irritated by their repeated shout and then saying, didn't you have this in mind when you got pregnant? Oh my God! Oh my God! You're kidding me! You're kidding me! Oh my goodness! Skip number 3, we're going to talk about Paulo Freire next time.
You really should start proofreading your quizzes.
Look at those ones that say accept. You have to find the thing that is wrong. Not the right answer, but the wrong thing, okay? no. We're just, you keep this. And we're just going to give 30 more seconds. 28, 26. Skip number 3. Tideaki, are you ready?
Last.
Yes, sir? Okay. Okay, Amani, you go first. What needs assessment is, which one did you pick?
B.
Anybody else have any alternatives? Does everybody agree with B? B is correct. Deep. Number 2. Number 2?
The concept of excluding or fostering disconfirmation can be best described as a process of, I choose C.
Anybody have any alternative opinions?
I chose C as well.
You chose C as well. How can it be anything else? Okay.
I have just got a little distracted. 1B is correct, right?
Yes, 1 is B.
B.
2 is C. Carlos, can you take 3? I'm sorry, 4. 4. Sorry. 4.
A collaboration of community groups in rural southeastern district with meat packing and ag dairy industries works with community partners to define a set of community health indicators around health behaviors of adult land. These CHIs ideally might include, except I put A, but I'm not quite sure.
Okay, now we're thinking, actually this is a true story from Georgia, from my days in Georgia. These are young guys, and their health indicators. Young guys that work in meat packing and egg and dairy industry.
C.
I'm trying to get Carlos to think through it. Do you think there's no possibility that those guys may be having problems with car injuries, car crashes? Because that's something that could happen with these guys.
Incidentally, it only became, I also put A and was unsure about it.
But now that you gave that piece of
Now that you
information,
say that they're young
that's-
men working in
Yeah.
meat, then it's a totally different situation. So,
Okay, these, maybe I should have said young adult men.
yes.
But now look at it again, and these guys, this is very hard work. Meat packing, you never sit down during meat packing, and it's very cold, and you're moving constantly. Tell me which one of those health indicators would be least appropriate.
Yeah,
I
C.
choose C.
Huh? Did you say C, Carlos?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be correct. Because those guys are not sedentary and they're not inactive and they're not old enough to be demented. If you're young enough to be working in meat packing, this sedentary lifestyle and activity and dementia would be more like for public health professors. Would be our kind of community health indicator. Yes, Dee?
Dr. Beck-Sagué, I am sorry, I have a little doubt about 1.
What?
I mean, needs assessment is, I was thinking of D. Ideally useful in increasing dependency of community adults in government agencies or NGOs.
That's not the ideal role of needs assessment. Although sad but true, it very often is used for that. But that is not, you want to promote independence of adults.
I think the key word here is ideally, because it's that it does do that, and she definitely said that it does that, but that's not what you want.
But how it supports the status quo?
Oh, okay. The idea of you remember the green, yellow, and red? You can actually use needs assessment to support the status quo by basically focusing on, for example, if you want people to basically feel that everything that's wrong with their lives is their fault, you can do a needs assessment that just is geared towards the alcoholism, the smoking, the sedentary, the overeating, the poor diet, poor dietary choices, watching too much television. I mean, that is a way of giving people the message that all of their problems are just because they're a bunch of lazy people. And there are needs assessments that read exactly like that. Alcoholism, drug addiction, obesity, smoking. You can do that. And it's true that community may have all those things. That's why it says it tacitly supports.
I mean, I get that, but I was thinking slightly different lines. To me, like, suppose if we talk of obesity, if we do a need assessment, like it may be due to the lack of parks, lack of healthy lifestyle. So that's rather, to me, didn't seem their own responsibility.
Yeah, I was saying it can. It doesn't always. There are some needs assessments that are genuinely just like that, very insightful, very willing to take a very ecologic view, but they can be very oppressive, and they really can sustain the status quo. And thank you for bringing that up, because obviously that was not very clear. But I'm not saying that it always does, but it sure can. Now, is there anybody here that wants to discuss the proceed? Have you taken one yet, Bernard?
Take it twice and take it a lot.
Hideaki, have you heard about the proceed model?
Yeah.
Okay. Who wants to do it? Okay, let it rip.
In the perceived model of health needs assessment, I picked A.
What? The proceed model focuses exclusively on what community members feel is the most important problem. The key word here is exclusively. That is not true. The proceed model has a lot of other things. Redeem yourself deep. Which one is correct? Gandar?
B.
Yeah. It has that phase 2, which is the epidemiologic diagnosis, where you examine vital statistics, reported illnesses, prevalence of specific diseases.
Yeah.
It's the statistical piece is called the
Doesn't
epidemiologic
they
diagnosis.
change diagnosis to assessment?
Yeah.
Because it's
But it's the same.
diagnosis was in the medical era when they used the perceive.
But in essence, it's very much that kind of data-driven step. Mercedes, number 6.
The following represent possible drawbacks of a needs assessment versus the capacity assessment model, except I put C.
May be interpreted as suggesting that the community has all the resources it needs already and should be wholly responsible for all aspects of its health status. Is this correct? Is C correct?
Yeah.
C is indeed correct. Who got a perfect score? Who got a perfect score? Who got only one wrong? You rock! You rock! Okay, have a wonderful week. Is everybody clear? If you're going to be doing an expert presentation, are you clear on what you're doing?
I will limit it to 5 slides or 5 minutes.
5 minutes. If you can squeeze 6 slides into 5 minutes, it's fine with me.
So I'm doing on Garmin Band, right?
I'm sorry? Yes. Yes.
What are you doing?
He's doing Ramen Band. He's doing
Should I type this
that
up
that one that's worldwide.
Yeah.
Yes,
and
please.
send it out to the group?
Please do that. And Carlos, you are doing the mechanics for a U.S. community-based organization, a United States community-based